Welcome to Everyday Buddhism, making every day better by applying the proven tools found in Buddhist concepts. Welcome to episode 45 of Everyday Buddhism, making every day better. I hope everyone is finding places of peace or at least stability in the continuing uncertainty of our lives. And as I've been sharing in many of my most recent episodes, I've been trying to find ways to deal with many of the troubling emotions that have arisen for me during these times, just like I'm sure you've all been doing. And as I shared with you in the last podcast episode, I started writing poetry again to help process some of the trauma I was previously holding on to and that was slowly being revealed to me by pandemic politics. You know, it helped in that it brought many repressed emotions to the surface for me to look at and to find ways to hold them tenderly so that they wouldn't rise up and strike out at others. I'm not saying I'm there yet, because I'm certainly not. I'm still struggling with all that, but at least I now know what's really hiding underneath. The traumas and hurts haven't been completely cleared and released, but now I recognize them for what they are. But I've also more recently committed to a more consistent daily meditation practice. I've always meditated, sometimes more how shall I say, disciplined than others. Sometimes using different techniques, sometimes saying, I will always do it every morning, I'll always do it every evening. But I've really started a nice focused practice for the last about 21 days, I think 21 days. And you know what they say about 21 days in the creating a habit. So I'm deep in the commitment to this meditation practice because I realized I needed to do something other than focusing on the horrible outside and inside of myself. I needed to take action to positively change the direction of my personal boat rather than sitting in fear and horror as I watched the storms continuously roar and threaten all of us and myself. And this leads me to the focus of this short episode, which is also a promotion for the next episode. And it contains a request for you, the listeners, to get involved. So keep listening. So I reached out to my teacher and friend, Gregg Krech, one of the leading authorities on Japanese psychology, about a week ago, to ask him to be a guest again on the podcast. I felt that if there was anyone who could help be a beacon to guide us through all these storms, these continuing storms, it would be Gregg. We had a nice conversation about uncertainty and about transitions. And in that conversation, he said something that was like a whack across the back of my head, from a stick by a Zen Roshi. I asked him what advice or practice he could offer to podcast listeners as we weathered these storms and looked into the future with great uncertainty. He said something like, well, it's not a mass issue. It's your personal situation and attachment. He went on to say that everyone is dealing with losses, but ultimately, it's an individual thing. And that really struck me because I realized that up until the time I actually committed to that meditation practice, and the meditation practice, I had been more looking at what was out there that was so bad, or what was inside me that was so bad, without um, without taking individual responsibility for where I would go next. And this reminds me of a talk I gave to the Open Sangha, the free Open Sangha, on a Tuesday afternoon at the beginning of June. I talked about how the waters we are in are uncharted and rough, and we don't see the horizon. We don't see where we are going. We don't see what we can do to even get to the horizon. And we don't even know if we will. But we still must keep going. You may have seen the Facebook meme or Instagram meme or all the memes, the Twitter meme about the pandemic. It's the one that says, we are not all in the same boat, but we are in the same storm. I heard people say that. I heard people say, well, at least we're all in the same boat. In fact, I think I have said it. But the pandemic quickly exposed the hard facts that despite dealing with the same storm, quote unquote, we are all riding it out in very different boats. Some are in a yacht, some a fishing boat, and some are hanging on for dear life as they fly roughly down a series of rapids on an overturned canoe. We are not in the same boat. Some are enjoying a pause in their frenetic lives, binge watching Netflix. Some are still employed and maybe even making more money than before. But others are working 2 jobs and trying to homeschool their kids. Some have already buried loved ones, and others are still fighting for their lives. And some are fighting for their freedoms. Some are Zooming happy hours with friends every day, and others are watching their child through a pane of glass at the hospital, or waving from a sidewalk to a loved one in a nursing home. Some are angry. Some are bored. Some are lonely. Some are terrified. Some are trapped inside with someone who is abusive. The pandemic quickly exposed the deep inequities people live with every day. Inequities of income, education, and opportunity. Inequalities that fall disproportionately on those of color, our black and brown brothers and sisters. As a white person, I do not pretend to know how the constant challenges caused by having another skin color can change the way you are able to live, can take opportunities away, can threaten your ability to make a living, threaten your health and your life. But all these things that are swirling about us right now in this swirling sea of uncertainty are questions, really. And I don't have answers. And as we teach in Buddhism, it is about sitting with the questions, sitting with the uncertainty, sitting with fear, anger, and even rage. Every day during these unbelievably awful times, I realize I am becoming a different person. Each new experience I sit with is a learning moment for me to grow and change and be challenged to evolve. I learned to meditate in the morning every day, breathing and feeling my body and mind alive in what is in my own present moment. Listening to birds at sunrise and enjoying the smells and sounds of the morning in the yard and garden. In doing that, I realized I was happy and grateful. Yet, the pandemic still exists, and yet, civil unrest rages. You may have heard this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, who said, quote, "When the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat remained calm and centered, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone to survive." Unquote. These are the questions to ask ourselves during these times. questions to help us remain centered and not picked up and carried off by fear, anxiety, anger, rage. Ask yourself, what does it mean to you to be calm and centered? Ask yourself, in times of trouble, can you embrace what you are feeling? Ask yourself, how did you survive a fearful experience or one of complete uncertainty before? I heard a Dharma talk by Sabine Selassie this summer earlier on, quote, being with uncertainty in these times. She read the poem Blessing the Boats by the late poet Lucille Clifton, a Black woman. I'll read it here. Blessing the boats at St. Mary's. May the tide that is entering even now, the lip of our understanding, carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain that it will love your back. May you open your eyes to water waving forever, and may you, in your innocence, sail through this to that. I think the last line in this poem was what Gregg Krech was getting at. The line, may I sail through this to that. This is about finding a way for each of us individually to sail through this to that. It's about finding a way to sail, not struggle. This is the practice of staying with the discomfort and allowing it moment by moment as life sails from this to that. The blessing of impermanence, which is the movement from this to that, can spark a growth of equanimity by remembering the big picture, the bigger perspective. As my teacher, Reverend Koyo Kabosi, says, keep going. This means we each need to do what we have to do to keep sailing. And for each of us, that's a little different depending on the boat we're in. And this takes us back to Gregg Krech and his comment about despite the fact that we are all dealing with uncertainty, with loss, with anxiety, with fear, with confusion, with depression and anger, these emotions are ultimately our own, and we each need to find a way to coexist with it all. So stay tuned for the next podcast episode when Gregg Krech will join me and offer some ways based on Japanese psychology of coping in these uncertain times and of finding ways to transition into the next whatever it is, of sailing from this to that. And as promised earlier in the episode, we would like you podcast listeners to send your questions about the questions you have personally about how to cope with these uncertain times. And please be as specific as possible while keeping your questions as brief as possible so I can read them on the podcast with Gregg. Please email them to Wendy Shinyo, that's WendyShinyo, at everyday-buddhism.com with the subject line, quote, question for Gregg, unquote. I will put this information in my show notes for your help and remembering. Now, we will be recording this episode on Tuesday, August 4th, 2020. So please email your questions no later than Sunday, August 2nd. We look forward to hearing from you. And that's it for this episode. I told you it was a short one. And as a reminder, don't forget that there are many ways to join me and others in either our private donation-supported Everyday Sangha every other week on Thursday evening, 7:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, or on our free public open Sangha, which is also virtual, every week, alternating on Tuesday afternoons at 2 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time with either me, Wendy Shinyo, or Rob Kanyo Sensei. And on the following week, Wednesday evenings at 7:30 p.m. with Levi Shinyo Sensei. So until next time, keep finding ways to make yours and everyone's days better.